The city of Oakhaven was a place of high-performance living, and no one performed better than Silas and Vera. They were the power architect and the efficiency expert, a couple whose relationship was managed like a Fortune 500 company. Their apartment was a sleek gallery of organization and success, where every conversation was a negotiation. Every gesture was a tactical empathy move. But behind the floor-to-ceiling glass, they were starving. They weren't loving each other. They were managing each other. The twist began at the Chrysalis, a luxury retreat that promised deep-state relational rebirth. They expected a spa. What they got was a psychological labyrinth. The retreat used a proprietary technology called the mirror image field, which projected their internal self-perceptions into physical space. On the third night, the walls of their suite turned into liquid mercury. Out of the surface stepped two entities that looked like distorted, hollow versions of themselves. The Shadow Silas was a man made of cold, interlocking gears. He had no heart, only a ledger of expectations. The Shadow Vera was a figure made of transparent glass, filled with toxic comparison. She was constantly checking a phantom screen, measuring herself against every woman Silas had ever glanced at. "You can't love him," the Shadow Vera hissed to the real Vera. "You don't even exist when he's not looking. You're just a reaction to his presence." The entities began to drain the light from the room. The real Silas and Vera tried to reach for each other, but their hands passed through one another like smoke. They were so busy empowering the relationship that they had completely neglected to empower the self. The dramatic crisis arrived when the house's AI, EOS, initiated the severance protocol. "You are currently operating at 0% individual integrity," EOS announced. "To love better, you must first survive alone." Initiating the inner strength trial, the room split into two separate dimensions. Silas was thrown into a void where he had no one to lead, no one to impress, and no one to manage. He was forced to face the empty and death of his own ego. He realized that his strength was actually a fragile shell built on the need for Vera's constant admiration. Vera was cast into a forest of mirrors where she had to find her own reflection among 1,000 better versions of herself. She had to learn that her worth wasn't a redistribution of Silas's attention, but a sanctification of her own soul. The twist was painful. To save their love, they had to be willing to lose it. In his void, Silas stopped trying to fix the situation. He sat in the darkness and whispered, "I am enough, even if I am alone." The moment he empowered himself to be whole without a partner, his gears turned into flesh and bone. In her forest, Vera stopped looking at the mirrors. She closed her eyes and listened to her own heartbeat. "I am the prize, not the competitor," she declared. The glass mirrors shattered into stardust. The dimensions collapsed, and they were thrown back into the center of the room. But they didn't rush to cling to each other. They stood up, brushed the dust off their shoulders, and looked at each other with new eyes. The happy ending wasn't a return to the iron pair status. It was the birth of something far more dynamic. They returned to Oakhaven, but they sold the minimalist apartment. They moved into a house with residents for their separate hobbies. Silas took up carpentry, working with wood that didn't care about his leadership metrics. And Vera began to mentor young artists, finding joy in her own creative voice. They learned that empowering yourself is the only way to avoid turning a partner into a crutch. "I don't need you to make me whole anymore," Silas said one evening as they sat on their porch, the air smelling of jasmine instead of clinical air freshener. "I know," Vera replied, her hand resting lightly, not desperately, on his. "And that's why I can finally love you for who you are, instead of what you do for me." They found a love that was a celebration, not a survival tactic. They became a couple that was strong because they were two powerful individuals who simply chose to walk the same path. They lived happily and independently ever after, together. If you liked this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Goodbye, see you next time.